forward? There we go. And you may all have to accept. I'm not sure, but I have started recording. All right. So our first question, Kiersten, why don't you start first, and then Randall, and then Jacob. So the first question is just give a brief introduction of what led you into financial planning and what has been your career progression since you started in financial planning.
Awesome. Yeah. So I am a career changer. I went to school quite a while ago for English and Spanish. Those were my degrees at the time. I had run into a webinar around the age of 24, 25 about saving an hour of your income a day. And I was like, I'm not even putting money in a 401k. I don't know what this is about. And it led me essentially down a rabbit hole of learning about personal finance and really ultimately opened the door to FIRE, which is financial independence and early retirement, which I was fascinated by. So much so that I realized I'd really like to actually teach people how to do that. And that led me to kind of financial planning. So I actually ended up deciding to go back to school. I went to DePaul up in Chicago and got my financial planning certificate. And then from there, ended up taking the CFP exam and kind of switched careers in 2021. So 2021 to now, I started as a paraplanner and then became an associate advisor and then switched over into lead advisor at the same company. So I've been with Citrine Capital for over 3 years now, which is kind of wild. But yeah, so that's a little brief explanation of my journey.
That's awesome. Randall, jump in.
Awesome. So I'm also a career changer. I graduated in 2008 with a finance degree, and I thought I would kind of go in kind of investment banking. But because in 2008 there was a financial crisis, I did a pivot towards internal audit, which I think was an amazing thing. Internal audit is like the least sexiest title you can have as a business professional, but the understanding of checks and balances really kind of propelled my career. I did about 7 years after internal audit in kind of corporate FP&A. There, while studying for the CFA, I learned something called wealth management. And I fell in love with the concept, the idea. And that's when I was like, this is what I want to dedicate my whole entire life to. So I decided to take the jump. And I don't recommend anybody do it straight off the back, but I took the jump about almost 9 years now, going out there, gaining clients, building a book of business. Also, along the way, I obtained my CFP designation as well.
Awesome. And just to let everybody know here, all of our panelists are career changers, but I have actually been in the industry since I graduated from Ole Miss. I went straight into the industry. So if you do have questions about somebody that's been in the industry the whole time, feel free to ask them. I can jump in on those. But career changer questions, these are your people to answer those questions. So sorry, go ahead, Jacob.
It's okay. So yeah, like the others, and as she mentioned, a career changer. For me, I'd been working as an engineer for probably 10, 11 years, and a little bit of what Kiersten said, just interest of in my own personal finances and saving and what I was gonna do for my future. But then I also had the opportunity that my parents happened to be working with an advisor, and being introduced to this job. I didn't know it existed until that point. I thought of finance as Wall Street or something like that only, right? And so when I saw that, I saw this opportunity that wow, you can help people with all these aspects of their money and really make an impact on an individual's life. And so that's when I went down the path of getting a certified financial planner designation, going back to get that certificate program to take that exam. And it was shortly after that I started, applying and looking for jobs. And my first job was at Ladera, where I'm at now, which is, an RIA or registered investment advisor firm, a fee-only firm, and we've got an office here in Atlanta. And I started out really as that paraplanner or supporting lead advisors. It was a salary position. I wasn't responsible for going and getting clients. I had the opportunity to learn and what planning was and what it's like working with clients each and every day. And then so that was in 2018. So since then I have progressed and gained more and more kind of client lead responsibility and leading those relationships and being that main point of contact.
That's awesome. Thank you. And so now we're going to really jump into y'all's questions. So again, if you have any questions you want to ask, either submit them in the chat, unmute yourself, or submit them through the QR code. I'm reading most of them over here. So I'm really going to go in not any particular order. If there's a question you really want to get asked, you can upvote it in that through that QR code. But my first question for you all, let's see. So, what is one piece of advice that's had the most profound impact on your success in financial planning? I love this question. All righty, Randall, do you want to take it away first?
Sure. So I think one of the most profound things that somebody's told me is this is a relationship business. Not only we're talking about relationships with the clients, but you also have somewhat of a community relationships to obtain clients. And then on top of that, we are specialized in planning, helping people achieve their goals. But what about things like insurance? What about things about taxes, estate planning? You have to have those relationships as well. So being able to nurture relationships, allow people to become comfortable with you, I think is one of the most valuable things that I've learned throughout this journey.
Awesome. Jacob, Kiersten? Jacob, you're unmuted. You want to go ahead?
Sure, I'll go. It's a quote I've heard from multiple different people and a few different times, so I think it must be a good one because I've heard other people say it is a good one too. But it was impactful for me early on coming into this job. I was trying to gain the confidence in myself to give the advice and thinking that I had to have a better answer or do more work and analysis to get a good answer. But it was that the perfect's the enemy of the good. I think we got to remember that it's people we're giving the advice to, and what they do is going to be different than what the number or the analysis we do says. So the other one that rhymed with it was, right, the more I work the numbers and I dig into it, I can be more precise, but I can't be any more certain. So we make a lot of assumptions about the future. And so, we got to remember that too.
That's great. Kiersten?
I would add, so as far as advice goes, a big one for me is that we should be doing more listening than talking. I think a lot of times, we are talked at and talked at and talked at. And when you're giving advice, obviously you have to communicate your recommendations. But I think clients really appreciate when you come into a call and you listen to what they have to say and how they're feeling and their goals. It really makes an impact for them. And oftentimes, one of probably the biggest compliments I can get is when a client says like, hey, I feel like I just went through a therapy session. Because it's, the behavioral side of it and the emotional side of it is just as important, because that impacts the decisions you make around your money and how you spend money. So listen more than you talk, I think is a big one. And that's been really beneficial for me.
That's awesome. That's great advice. So how do you all stay on top of market trends, new regulations, and other changes in the financial industry? Is there a specific news outlet you look at? Give us a little debrief about what all you look at and how you stay on top of all the trends. So Kiersten, if you want to go first, we'll jump to Jacob and then Randall. So
no problem. The one that I find most helpful is actually Nerd's Eye View, Michael Kitsis's blog. He has a blog. He's got like several podcasts. They're all incredibly helpful. But this guy and his team is constantly providing updates on the industry and what's going on, different regulations, and things like that. So I find that area kind of an easy one-stop shop for information on what's kind of new in the industry and that it impacts planning.
What about news? Where do you watch your news? Do you read your news? Are you reading newspapers?
Well, so Kitsis does that too.
Right.
He sends out the weekend reading for financial planners, and it's all news stories curated around that kind of stuff. Now, I generally read my news. That's, I guess, the answer to that question. I don't have cable TV, don't have any of that. So I generally read my news, and usually that is through Kitsis. And then NAPFA and the FPA, like they send out articles and like newsletters that kind of pull together articles and things about what's going on kind of in the industry. So that can be helpful as well.
Awesome. Jacob?
Yep, I would echo those. the Kitsa site, and then I think Kiersten mentioned like the FPA and NAPA have their news brief or smart brief they call it, where you can, they send out, where they've a bunch of articles, so it's one stop you can kind of go through and pick out based on the title where you want to read it, because there's tons of information, right? So you're not gonna have time to do it all, so it helps to have it sent to you, so you can pick and choose which ones you're looking at. And then it's for me, when I drive into the office, I have a commute, so it's listening to podcasts, and it's trying to make sure it's a mix of, maybe actual news or stories about the news, and or just different topics around, as you mentioned, Kits has got podcasts, but just different topics that I'm interested in, and I think one thing I would say is it can help to read things outside the industry as well, right? Because when you talk to the clients, like they don't only want to talk about, industry related stuff, topics. So it helps to
That's
be,
true.
yeah.
Jacob, do you want to give them a few examples of like your favorite podcasts that you listen to daily? I just love
Uh,
actionable that they can go listen to them on their
yeah.
own.
Let me see what I've got. So I listened to the one, I'm pulling it up now through the, it's just called The Journal. It's the Wall Street Journal one. They're real short, 15 minutes maybe at the most, and they do it each day. So that's kind of nice. You can pick and choose. It doesn't take too long. And then I've got the,
Sorry to
let's
put you
see.
on the spot.
No, it's okay. There's some, like, whether it's like the Daily from the New York Times. There's some of the newspapers that put out podcasts as well that I listen to. And then I've got one that's either the Knowledge Project or Plain English, Freakonomics Radio. Some of these they dive a little deeper into different stories and kind of stuff that's happening. So.
Awesome. That's great. And just to share two really quick, quick plug for Caleb Brown. I believe he's a professor at UGA. He's got a new planner podcast and it is awesome. I've actually been on the podcast. He makes it so much fun and he interviews a lot of new planners and it's a great way to learn in the beginning. And then I listen to Morning Brew every morning. I'm not sure if anybody's listened to it, but it's great. Randall, why don't you elaborate a little bit more? If you can add any
Sure.
more news
Yeah, I like to
sources.
echo everything said. Kitsis, news articles, podcasts, plus plus. I think something a CPA told me is the IRS website. People don't think about that. You ask these CPAs different questions, and they will tell you go to the source. You have to use sometimes your own interpretation skills. So we think we're not tax preparers, but a lot of the advice we give does have tax consequences. So don't be shy. Go ahead and go to irs.gov and look up whatever you're looking towards and try to find the answer.
Yep, that's great. Investopedia too is one that's awesome, especially when you're first starting out. If you don't know a term, Investopedia is going to tell you what it is. So I love it. All right, let's see. So, what specific skills or knowledge areas do you believe are critical for aspiring financial planners to develop early on? Let's see. Jacob, do you want to start this time?
Sure. Yeah, I'll be happy to. I think early on, for me, I'll speak through my experience that I leaned on would be, let's say, almost time or project management, but just if you're working with multiple different clients and different advisors or coworkers, right? There's a lot coming at you at different times, and just being able to sort organize and kind of keep track of what you're doing, right? That's going to help you, I think, throughout, no matter what stage you're in. And then it's, for me, those technical skills, while I think early on are very important, because that's where at least, or typically you get the opportunity to participate and kind of show what you know with the clients. But then long term, yeah, it's that how to have maintain those relationships with clients. And coworkers, everybody, right? It's a team, and everybody's, you've got the client, whether it's internal or external, that you got to keep happy and take care of, and again, try to have those relationships. That's what makes it fun too. So
That's awesome. Kiersten, you want to go next?
Yeah, so as per my favorite books, I am an introvert. Talking to people is hard. I've gotten much better at it, I think, in the career that I've chosen doing this work and talking to clients, and networking in the community. I would say making sure you have the skill set to talk to people, because you're going to be talking to people all the time. So whether you're an introvert, an extrovert, or some mix of the two, I think it's really important to have that skill set. And that doesn't necessarily mean like, you know, sales tactics or anything like that. Just like being able to connect with people on a personal level, I think is just really, really important in whatever way that you're comfortable doing. So that I think is just a really having that skill set, I think earlier on in my career would have been very helpful. I think I've been forced to build that skill set, but it's been a really important one to have.
Awesome. Randall?
I think flexibility. To kind of piggyback on what Jacob was alluding to a little earlier, you're going to present a perfect plan to your clients, and they're going to say no and yes to so many of those things. So, can you be flexible with going along with the get along, knowing that long term you can maybe steer them in the correct direction? I think is a good thing. So, just being flexible, understanding that they're not going to be perfect, you're not going to be perfect, and that it is a journey and a relationship with your clients. I think it's important.
That's awesome. And I just want to throw one in here too. For me, Kiersten, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but when I first started, I really got involved in the industry more. So involved in financial planning association, meeting more newer, younger advisors. I work at a company where I'm by far the youngest person. And so it can be a little bit intimidating in the beginning to be young. And so plugging yourself into the industry where you have a lot of people in the same career stage as you, the same life phase, it can do wonders for your career growth, your confidence, and just building on all of those. So that is my one advice I would give to everyone. All righty, next question. So, what do you think distinguishes a good financial planner from a great one? That's a really hard question. Kiersten, I'll let you go first. Throwing you guys a curveball.
I don't think this is that much of a curveball, honestly. Um, the technical skill set I feel like is a lot of people can do that, right? You can learn about estate planning and taxes and like the how to do a budget, and like those things are important to know. You should have that background information. But I actually think what makes someone a great planner is knowing how to apply those things to like client situations, right? Because every client is unique. And not only that, but as Randall mentioned earlier, a lot of clients will you'll kind of present your plan and they'll be like, well, I'm not going to do that, or I'm going to do it differently, or I want to adjust it with this, or what do you think about that? And they're just like throwing things at you, right? But I think what makes it creates a great planner is if you can kind of work with that ambiguity, right? So you have all this technical knowledge and skill, but it doesn't always apply, and you have to kind of figure out how to like adjust based on what the client is telling you, because these are individual human beings that you're working with. So I think that's really what actually makes people stand out, and what makes you great is when you are able to really flex and figure out how to make these technical things work for people, actual people.
Yeah, that's awesome. So true. Randall?
I think what makes a difference is if you care, because I think that caring makes you go the extra level. You'll actually ask the question about, their kid or their grandchild. You'll ask the question about their career, their job, how they're feeling, what they're going through, and that emotions. And that's how you pull that, I guess, golden nugget of information that really makes a difference in the plan, deepen the relationships, and it's just good business practice. So I think an advisor that cares is really what makes the difference.
That's awesome. Jacob?
I completely disagree with it. No, yeah, yeah. No, I think I would agree with those. And I think when great is, yeah, when you're able to, I think to each of their point, like look ahead, because these are long-term relationships, and say, or look back 5 or 10 years and go, look how far we've come with this client and look where we are today. And the client says, I didn't even, that wasn't even my goal 5 years ago. Like, I didn't even know I wanted to be here, but look at where we are and look what we did together. Like, to me, that's a great one. A good one can make sure they don't make a mistake, and lose all their money or something like that, right? But the great one can get them someplace they didn't even know they wanted to go, but they're happy to be there. So
That's awesome. All right, this one is specifically for Kiersten. We just kind of talked about it a little bit, and so I want you to elaborate more because this is a question from the audience. So, what strategies did you use to get out of your shell? Did it happen with time, or is it something more intentional that you did to really improve your speaking to clients?
Practice. A lot of practice is really what it was. So I got kind of thrown into the spotlight. We had an advisor leave our firm, and I was a paraplanner at the time, and they said, "Oh, this person left. You're taking all of their clients. Go." And so I really kind of got shoved into like, hey, you just need to start talking to people, and you need to get to know them and start that process. And so just day after day after day, meeting people, it was like eventually I was figuring out like what are the right questions to ask, and how do I like create a space where I can have these conversations. I am someone who like initially getting to know someone I think is really challenging. But as I get to know them, I get more comfortable, right? So, for me, like prospect meetings are probably the hardest, but even that, continuing to do those over and over and over and over again, I know exactly what questions I'm asking. I know that I'm trying to get the prospect to talk as much as possible. So I learn as much as I can about them. And I'm a very good listener. Like I can do that all day long, right? So I think just playing to my skill sets, and then the fact that I really did just get pushed into like, you just need to do this over and over and over and over again until eventually it was like, right, prospect meeting, no problem. I do this all the time. So practice really helps.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great feedback. Randall, I remember in the last panel session, you talked a little bit about some things that you use to improve your speaking skills, like Toastmasters, I believe. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, by far, dollar for dollar. If you want to do some type of training, Toastmasters give you the most bang for your buck. Toastmasters are public speaking organizations where, and it sounds like it is, you give speeches on different topics and they have a curriculum. Speaking in front of people, having people critique your speaking actually helps you as a speaker. So I think that's something that is really valuable. I recommend anybody go through it if you want to be public facing or even client facing.
Yeah, I know we've got some in Atlanta. I looked into it last year, and there's a good bit of resources there. FPA has pushing FPA a little bit, but they have a residency program where I don't know a whole lot of details, but I know when you first start out in the industry, it's pretty great up to like 3 years in the industry where it's similar to Toastmasters, but it's more condensed into like a few days where you're learning how to present a plan to a client, and you're being kind of talked to from other peers about how you can present it better, given some good feedback. So the residency program is something I've talked to our COO about. Any new planners that come to our firm, I'd love for them to go through. So whenever you start getting into the workforce, I think it's a great thing to go through. Jacob, anything else you want to add to like, I guess, speaking tips, learning how to communicate better?
I'll echo the FPA residency. I didn't, but an advisor in our office did it, and it was very beneficial to him. I think, and the way they seem to help, or what he said helped most is they took away all the technology tools and things that you use every day and kind of said, hey, you've got to present it, but just by writing, more manual, and so it forces you to simplify, which I think is a big piece of it. But to both, I would echo for myself, you can practice and hear other people say what to do a lot, but I feel unfortunately this is one you're gonna have to do. Like I don't think there's a lot of shortcuts to getting comfortable leading those meetings when they're looking at you to give that advice. It just takes some practice going through and to build that confidence. I think that's where a lot of it comes, just having confidence in yourself, which for me came after some repetitions.
Yep, for sure. All right. We've got one more a specific question for Randall. Can you talk about your journey to founding your firm now And how did you get clients and build your book of business?
That's a good question. So we talk about the RIA space, that we know that stands for Registered Investment Advisor. So what that means, you have to register with the state of Georgia to provide investment advice. So the process was you have to create an ADV file, which is a long legal document explaining what you do. And you had a compliance person can do that, a lawyer can do that for you. And then you submit that to the state of Georgia. And once they approve that, along with getting the securities license that you need, to get the securities license or CFP, you can now provide financial advice within the state of Georgia and some other states given the laws that they have. Okay. So once you have completed that part, you have to now say, how am I going to find clients? How can I sit across from the table from somebody and say, trust me with your lifelong savings? I believe in you. I have faith in you. And even though you have your actual finger on the button at any time, I think I'm better off with you than not with you. What that takes is years and years of just being out in the market. I have the benefit that I'm from Georgia, come from a large family, did a lot of community things most of my life. So it took year after year of saying, this is what I do, I can help you. And then the clients start trickling in. And I think if I could leave anybody with anything, there's a term called riches and niches. There are riches and niches, meaning the more specialized you can get, the more you can charge that premium price. So one of the things is I really niche down into kind of 3 customer segments, which are pre-retirees, self-employed individuals, and practice owners. So really all I do is speak on that aspect and become known in the community. So for an example of that is I speak to 3 postdoc programs every year, just specifically speaking to what they've been through going through college and what they can expect in income. And that's how you build trust within a specific market. And once they trust you, when that financial need comes, they may give you a call to be one of your clients.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. All right, let's see. What is a significant challenge you face every day as a financial planner? Tough question. Jacob, you want to go first?
Yeah, I can go first. You asked me to, so I will. Yes, significant challenges. You do get asked different questions, right? And you have different personalities, right? It's different people. So I think what makes it interesting for me is that point, but it also makes it difficult in that, right? One client, all 3 clients may call and ask, should I buy a new car? Should I take a loan out, or should I pay cash for this car? Right? The 3 of them may ask you, but you may give 3 different answers because they're in 3 different situations, and or 3 different preferences. So it's just that difficulty in knowing the client and being confident that, hey, I gave 3 different answers. I didn't give one a wrong answer and one a right answer, right? It was 3 right answers because of who they are and the situation they're in. So just sometimes that can be hard when when it comes like that. So
that's a great analogy. All right, Kiersten, you want to go?
Sure. I think this is actually somewhat of a subjective thing, right? Like I think each person is actually going to find a particular thing challenging for them. And so if I'm thinking about it from that perspective, for me, I think the biggest challenge is not knowing everything. I always, I want to have the right answer all the time. And I just don't think that that's possible because there's just so much content in the world and so much information about personal finance, and it is personal. Thus it is in the name. So I think for me, I have the biggest challenge that I've come across in the time that I've done this is really being comfortable saying, I don't know. And then following that up with, but I'm going to find out, right? Like, I'm not just going to leave you hanging and tell you I don't know, but I'm going to figure it out. So just being in that place of discomfort of saying like, oh, I actually don't know the answer to that question, but I can figure it out, I think is a big one. And it's still challenging. Sometimes I want to have the answer and I'm like, hang on, before I say something wrong, I have to just tell you I don't actually know, and I'm going to go figure it out. So yeah, I'd say that one is for me probably the biggest challenge.
Randall?
I think the biggest challenge for me, and I think it's different being a business owner, is you have to massage this business in the sense of You have to regularly do things to promote yourself and market. You have a list of compliance items that you have to take care of. You have to keep your books, and you have to do those things on a regular month in and month out basis, even though you could get busy, even though you may go on vacation, even though you may have family matters. So the challenge is making sure that you're staying on top of those little mundane tasks that aren't client impacting. There's no glitz, glamour, glory for doing those things, but it's necessary to run a business.
Yeah, that's great. I want to jump in here too because I feel like it could resonate with some of y'all. It's not really a challenge I face so much today, or else I don't really see it as an obstacle, but age was something because I started out right in the industry, and it was always just something in the back of my head. But I have built confidence, and I've gotten to the point where I feel like a lot of clients trust me no matter what my age is. And so just know you're not going to be alone if you do start out in the industry right out of college. But if you surround yourself with a community that's kind of in the same life phase as you guys can grow in your confidence together, and you'll get to that point where age really doesn't matter. And it's just something you've thought about in the back of your head. So, all right. This question has been asked twice, so we definitely need to ask it. So what has a role of a financial planner evolved over the past decade, or how has it evolved, and where do you see the field going in the next 5 to 10 years? So trends coming up. Anybody who wants to go first can go first. That's a tricky question.
I think I can kick us off. I'm a career changer. I've been in this industry for 3.5 years, let's say, maybe 4 years actually, since it's November, which is wild. That being said, I actually don't know that I can speak to like historically. If we're gonna go back like significant like decades, I could probably speak to like what I've been taught the industry used to be like. But I can speak to what I think we're heading in going forward, because this is getting talked about a lot. But a lot of what I'm seeing, or more of what I'm seeing, is advisors going into fee-only spaces. Niching is really important, and then advice-only planning is starting to come up, which means the advisor does not manage assets at all. They literally, for a flat hourly rate or like a flat annual fee, provide advice only and do not actually manage assets for a client. And I think all of those things are kind of becoming more and more, you know, popular. More people are doing them, and it's what I think that leads to is really opening the industry to more clients. If you're offering an hourly fee for advice only, somebody could pay $150 an hour and talk to an advisor, and that's going to be much more affordable. And more of an option for people who don't have assets yet than hey, you have to have at least $1 million to walk in the store. So I'm really excited about that from like a forward-looking perspective. And that would be what I'm seeing at least right now.
Awesome. Randall, do you want to go next?
Sure. So I think what's transitioned is clients are demanding more from us. Gone are the days where you could provide an asset allocation and you're done. Gone are also on the days where you could provide an asset allocation plus some planning advice, a checklist, and say, hey, this is what you want you to do. They are asking more, and that's why the niching is really important. They want a true advisor throughout their life. So just expect in your lifetimes that clients are going to continually ask more and more. And that's across all professional service industries. So I don't think financial planning is unique in that aspect.
Totally agree. Jacob?
Yeah, so I was a career changer, so I don't have a ton of experience, but it was about 10 years ago that I started thinking about this and was aware of it, and like trying to figure out how do I, get a job in this industry. And so, and from what I've seen, I think at least then the industry and the relationships were a lot more about, we were sort of the keepers of the information. Not that the internet was there, but it was still hard to kind of figure out where was a good source of information. And so they would come to the advisors and ask questions that now you could say do a simple search and it can find a good answer too. So it was almost just like, here's the information that I learned through my coursework, and now I'm telling you, and like that was where the value was. And so going forward, yeah, they're both, Randall and Kiersten, had good points, and I feel like the first 5 years of when you start, like you're going to be learning and growing and changing with it. So I think there's less emphasis or maybe of needing to know where it's going because you're growing with it and changing and like so you're going to move right along with what's happening. And then yeah, when you once you've sort of adapted and got used to where you're at and what you're comfortable, what you like doing, it's going more those relationships and you know some of the other stuff would be going away, right? Just the technical pieces. It's going to lean more and more on those, like Randall said, the relationship side of it. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. I too, I mean, I've seen a huge shift to, not a huge shift, but a shift to younger advisors and a lot more CFP programs and financial planning programs in colleges. And so that's been a big shift. And then also companies that develop a career path for people that start out in the industry kind of right outside of college or career changers rather than you starting with a firm and you're expected to just bring in a book of business. A lot of it is shifted to you can start in the operational path, you can start as a paraplanner, and then you work your way up into like leading relationships and becoming an advisor. So I'm currently on a career path to do that. And so I can't say enough wonderful things about that career path. And I also went to a conference last year and it was about 400 of us and they were all young advisors in the same life phase. So it was amazing. Pretty cool. All right. Thoughts on the great wealth transfer and how this is going to affect the industry? Let's see. Randall, do you want to go first?
I'll have a controversial take. I'll step up. I don't believe it's going to be as dramatic as people make it out to be. Large firms have been really good at keeping money in house. So what does that look like? Creating trust, generation skipping trust, things of that nature. So the great wealth transfer, I don't think will really be that big of an impact from, I guess, the individual going into the industry as much as we may think. So I'm not a big buyer of the great wealth transfer from the business or the advisor side or gaining client side. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Kiersten?
I guess I approach it from a different direction. I don't know whether there's going to be like a huge exodus from large, firms or anything like that. But what I do think about is how I connect with my clients. Most of my clients are anywhere from late 20s to late 40s. I don't actually work with retirees or pre-retirees currently. So I think about it more from the perspective of what relationships am I building with my clients, and then what relationships am I building with their children. And some of the ways that that kind of manifests are conversations around like, how are you educating your children about money? What resources can I provide you so that you can educate your children about money? Because you have millions of dollars and that money's going to go to your kids someday, very likely. And who are they going to want to work with at that point, right? So I guess I think about it more so from how it impacts my day-to-day and my clients' lives than I am thinking about it from an industry overall, because I'm seeing that coming, right, for my clients and for their families. And so I'm thinking about it more from that perspective and what can I do to help forge those relationships now, because I'm planning on being in this industry for a long time. So I want to work with them and I want to work with their kids. And yeah, so that's where I approach it from.
Awesome. Jacob?
Yeah, I would say I think it's maybe I don't know if it great transfer, but it's opportunities, right? Whether it's somebody, that's you're working with the older client and it's going to children or something and you have the opportunity to work with them, that it's still a new relationship. Or and I've seen and read quite a few studies that say like there's a pretty large percentage of people that inherit the money, like changing the advisor they work with, right? They don't have the same relationship, that their parents or whoever they inherited the money from had. And so they're looking to move. So again, I mean, there may be opportunity, whether maybe they didn't, even if they don't move, right? It's a new relationship and hopefully, if they may be closer to your age or, starting. And so it's a good opportunity to grow with a client. Um,
I second that. My firm is structured where there's three generations and we work with three generations of clients. And so our owner is like 78 and he works with all the grandparents, and then so on. And so I'm working with all the kids of clients, and it's really good for an associate advisor, somebody kind of starting out in the industry, to not practice, but they're much more your age. So I'd say the great wealth transfer is really a good opportunity for younger advisors too. And it gives you the opportunity to work with the kids of clients. So, all right, let's see. And then the question is, can you briefly, I'm sorry, I should have done this in the beginning. Can you briefly explain what the Great Wealth Transfer is for those who might not be familiar? I can explain it briefly. You guys feel free to jump in, but to my understanding, it's essentially the fact that there's a large population of, we'll call them baby boomers and kind of above, that are passing away, and they're going to leave money to their children and grandchildren. And it's that transfer of the assets and who's going to be managing those assets. Because if you don't have the relationship with the kids or the grandkids, then the money will potentially go to a different advisor. Anybody else feel free to add, but that's kind of how I interpreted it.
Yeah. I think it's just my only other point is just that what makes it different. People have died for a long time now, but that during that generation or period of time, like there was a lot of wealth, or a greater proportion, of wealth created. The economy and everything had done really well after World War II. So I guess more people have more money than they've ever had before. So like that, just the scale of it, I guess, is maybe what's different too.
All right, we have time for probably one more question. And we have two left. So in no particular order, I guess I will ask, what strategies or tools do you use to help clients understand the emotional side of their financial decisions? So getting into behavioral finance. Randall, why don't you go first?
Yeah, so no matter who your client is, there's going to be some underneath emotion. There's something to say, all of our parents messed up somewhere. And that goes with how they think about money as well. So there's going to be some angst or something that is inconsistent what you learned in your CFP curriculum to how your clients think and want to operate about money. So the key thing is, you have to present that in front of them. I think the CFP curriculum shows that well. You have to push a little bit more when there's less wealth, but when there is more wealth, you can actually be more flexible. So knowing how to push, when to push, how to show them that these behaviors are inconsistent. I think it's kind of an art of our job of when and how to present, hey, this behavior is not healthy when we talk about growing your wealth.
Kiersten?
So I have been spending, I think, more and more time learning about behavioral finance and kind of what goes into that. As far as how I get clients to think about that, I think a lot of that stems from the relationship I have with a client. If they trust me and we have communicated a lot about kind of what's going on in their lives and they're willing to open up about some of those things, then it's easier to do. Oftentimes I will just kind of turn a question back to a client. If they say, oh, I want to do this thing. And I'm like, internally, if I'm thinking like, well, maybe that's not the best choice financially, I will say like, hey, can you tell me more about why you want to go down this path? Like, what is driving that decision, right? And that can lead to conversations on, oh, well, my family did this or whatever, like these historical things, right? These money stories that people have, it can kind of lead to, well, I felt like I had to. A lot of people want to buy houses because they feel like they have to, like it's the American dream to buy a house. You don't have to do that. So oftentimes it's like, well, tell me why, right? Or, I want to be a landlord. Okay, tell me, where is that coming from, right? And oftentimes it's rooted in, well, I feel like I have to because my parents did, or I feel like I have to because society's telling me I have to. And so I think that it's those conversations, I think, of like, okay, what's the deeper meaning, what's going on for you, what's coming up for you, is kind of the best way to get people to open up about some of that stuff. And it goes back to the listening thing too, right? Ask that question and then shut up and let them talk.
That's awesome. All right, Jacob.
Yeah. So today was meeting with a client and was going over the investment or the portfolio performance. And I know early on, when I first started, when I would have gone through that, we were reviewing, so basically a line chart just showing the performance over time, that this client's been with us 10 years or so, and just how the balance is done over time. And I would have focused completely on the numbers, and it dropped 10% here, it's up 9.6%, and just gone on and on about that. But in there's stories and opportunities. This client was invested during COVID 2020. There's a sharp drop on that chart. And so instead of just focus on the numbers, it's just, how did you feel? What were you thinking then? And so it something that we presented each time, and it would have been numbers before, but just stopping to say, what were you thinking? How are you feeling then? And giving them an opportunity to talk, because it led to, they were feeling uneasy about something currently. And it's like, well, you remember, look at that. You just told me how you worked through and handled, and what was a very scary time, in the past. So, this is why we're confident you can do it again. And so.
Great. I love that. All right. We have 2 minutes left. There's only one question left, and I feel really bad if we don't get to this one question. So you guys, if you could answer pretty quickly, that'd be great, so we can get you out of here on time. But the question is kind of similar, but not really. So how do you approach building trust with new clients, especially when discussing sensitive financial matters? So Jacob, do you want to go first?
I would say it's acknowledging it, and then just sort of saying and telling them that, we have a lot of other clients that feel that way. I think I've seen a lot of people appreciate knowing that I'm not the only one thinking this or feeling this. So letting them know that you're not alone in that.
That's great. Kiersten?
Yeah, so people really like knowing that they're not the only one. I would totally +1 that with what Jacob said. The other thing that I often say to people is there is no stupid question and there is no wrong answer. Even if it's like, the financial decision might be an incorrect decision, right? We are just having a conversation and there is no wrong answer. So I think that is really just giving people space, knowing that they can say whatever they need to say, and that I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, how dare you say that? Like, no, you get to say whatever you want, and we're going to talk about it, and it's going to be fine. I am not judging you. I am not passing any, feelings about it. I just want you to feel comfortable to have these conversations with me, and creating that space of like, it's safe here for you to just say whatever you feel like you need to say. And then we're going to figure out how we can get you to like the next, whatever the thing is that your goal is, that we can get you there. So those are some of the things that I do to help clients feel safe.
Great. Randall, carry us home.
And I think this said over and over again, listening. I think when the client calls you and say, hey, I remember last week Fluffy was in the vet. How did it go? Or I know your son was having this issue with so and so and so and so. So if they feel heard, I mean, that pays dividends, because in this world, nobody listens to anybody. And that's a very special place an advisor can sit with clients.
Yeah. Leaning into that personal. Awesome. Well, we got through all the questions, record timing. That was great. So just to close us, I wanted to let y'all know that we are here to be resources for you. If you ever want to just jump on like a quick 30-minute call, ask more questions of us, we would love to do that. We had a Georgia Tech panel, and I've talked with a few students there. So please feel free to reach out to us. I'll give our contact information so you have that. And then also with FPA, we have a career guide now that we just released, and it's for kind of newer planners getting into the industry. And there's different kind of places in the industry you can go. So I will give that as well as a resource. And I believe that it's it. I've really appreciated you guys. Y'all had some wonderful questions. love the questions you asked. And thank you, panelists, for handling all those questions. All righty. Thank you, guys. I appreciate y'all. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you so
you.
much. Have a nice night, y'all.
Thank you so much.